We have another episode of Tailwind. Today we're joined by Michael Wills. Michael, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, thanks for having me. So, Michael Wills, I started a firm, Top Line Solutions, as a fractional VP of sales about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years, and working with primarily small business owner founders to build great sales organizations.
Nice. Yeah, and before the episode, we were talking a little bit, and you're talking about early in your career. I think the phrase was, go with God and come back with money, and that was all of the direction you were given. Tell me a little bit more about that scenario that you found yourself in, and kind of what happened when you were experiencing, I guess, that lack of support.
It's a true story, and so I did work for a company, and it isn't unique. They had absolutely no sales strategy built out, and they just expected the sales reps to go out in the field and bring back business. And as a sales team, we kind of phrased it, go with God and come back with money. And I would jump in the company car and I'd make a bunch of sales calls during the day, and I'd close business and create a unique product with a unique pricing model, and all excitedly come back to the office and say, here's our new client. And then they'd look at me, and then they'd have to figure out, well, what did you sell? How do we implement this thing? And how do we make money off of it?
Hmm.
And, it's, I realized that the leadership really delegated sales strategy to the sales team and to
Hmm.
me as a sales rep, and how dysfunctional that was. And I went off and created my fractional sales business 10 years ago. And I started hearing a lot of the same stories. I could see
Okay.
in my clients that the sales reps were prospecting without real clarity on who the right client was and why. And and it was, the owner, the founder instinctively knew who the right clients were. They started the
Hmm.
business. They closed the first clients. They knew their products intimately and how it would help how it would help those companies. And yet they never communicated that insight to people in the organization. Um, and so then what would happen is the owner would, sales reps would go out and create it and try and identify what the right ICP was for the business. And then the owner would do one-on-ones with them and get really frustrated that they were seeing this pipeline full of opportunities that weren't a fit. And so owners would then, tell me this story about how doing one-on-ones, and they get really frustrated about these poor deals. And I asked them, I said, well, is that a sales problem or is that a leadership problem?
Right. What was the typical answer that you got?
Well, it stopped them. It's
Just dead in the tracks.
it stopped them in their tracks because, it's not the salesperson's responsibility to figure that ideal client out. It's leadership's
Right.
responsibility. Leadership developed the company, they created the products, they built the whole model around who they want to service and why. And, who are we uniquely built to help? What are the products and what are the buying signals and buying triggers that are the right time to engage? What makes us different? And why are we different? And sales can't be responsible for answering those questions.
Yeah.
It's got to be leadership. And and I think that once leaders go through that exploration process and help map that out and then communicate that, then prospecting can really happen effectively, and ultimately salespeople can happily sell.
So if you have a sales leader right now who's listening in and they're wondering, gosh, is this me? Is this my problem? What would you kind of recommend be like some questions they can ask themselves, some things that they can look for to start to diagnose that, hey, really need to fix this specifically. It's actually not, maybe I've identified five different things, but after thinking about, what Michael's told me, these three things have totally set off the red flag, or this one thing, or I don't, whatever it might be. Is there a specific thing that a leader can kind of put themselves through to start realizing, oh, all right, that is my problem. I need to start directly addressing it.
Yes, it's a great question. So, I work with a mindset that there's founder-led sales ceiling,
Hmm.
and there are contributing factors to why founders hit that sales ceiling. And they factors like they're still overly responsible for the sales revenue. Um, they're challenged with they've hired people that they believe ultimately are the wrong people. They don't recognize oftentimes that it's a sales infrastructure that is the problem and not necessarily the people that are the problem. So I think that, leadership needs to recognize that they define strategy, sales delivers the strategy, and prospecting executes that original strategy. And it's a core element. Once they have that built out, then they can start installing the processes, the tech stack, to be able to then execute what the leadership wants the sales team to do. And that's the struggle. It's that I always like to say founders have almost never been heads of sales, right? So they don't, it's just not an experience set that they usually have. They're leaders, they're product developers, they're financial people, whatever, but they've really never been head of sales. So it's it's a challenge for them to recognize the deficiencies in their sales organization, and why their sales organization oftentimes um, significantly behind the structure and quality of operations, the structure and quality of finance. And but because they don't understand how sales really works, they haven't built the organization that will allow it to be a team that is at least as good or if not better. And in my mind, sales has to be as good or better than operations and finance.
Yeah.
And it's got to be the driving factor of the organization. And when it is, that's when you scale rapidly.
Yeah. As somebody who has spent most of their career on the operations side, mostly because when I started, I had a couple of sales jobs and I had a very similar lack of any sort of strategy or direction. It was, hey, here's this, membership guide for the Oregon State Bar. Go call everybody. And I was like, what am I doing? And it was like, just call them. You'll figure it out. Like, good luck. And then like I had another one and it was this over and over and over again. So I was like, all right, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to the ops side. And from somebody who's on the ops side, you can have the best team in the world, but if your sales team isn't delivering, it does not matter. But alternatively, you can have a great sales team and a bad ops team, and you'll do better than the team that's opposite.
Yeah.
So as somebody who spent most of their career on the other side, I could not agree more, even though my druther should be, or I should be like defensive over the territory and be like, no, you have to have ops first. Like, no, you don't. Uh,
No.
so as as somebody who is a founder that's lead like or is running founder-led sales, is it something where like wait till this point to start doing these things, or is it never too early to be considering what you're talking about right now? And if you have a founder that says to him and you feel like there's any gap here, you should stop everything and work on it today.
Yeah. So I think that there's an initial window that you've got to build some things internally.
Yeah.
Um, and then you reach a point where you can start to see the dysfunction, right?
Hmm.
You're continuing to have referral based leads and not company created leads.
Hmm.
You're not having conversations with new companies. You're trying to hold on to your existing clients, and you're realizing that there's no more growth there. The growth of a client is offset by another client leaving, right? So
Yeah.
once you start to see that phase and you start having an annual budget meeting where you say, oh, we're going to grow 8%. And somebody from operations says, well, how's that going to happen? We don't have
Yeah.
we don't have a sales team that's driving opportunities,
Yeah.
that's organically growing. I think that's when you start seeing that, and then you combine that with the founder constantly being responsible for revenue generation. And I like to challenge founders and saying, okay, so if you took 90 days away from your business, what would happen to it?
Hmm.
What would happen with revenue generation? And the vast majority of them say it would completely fall apart. So if the answer there, you can start to see those are the questions, the self-reflective questions to identify when have I hit that founders-led sales ceiling. It's
Hmm.
that as a founder, I'm far too involved in revenue generation. I don't have a team that's operating independently and is structured and organized as effectively as other departments of my company. Other departments and people in my company don't believe or trust or value the sales organization. We're not having new conversations with companies. We don't have a pipeline of quality prospects that fit the opportunities that we would want to see and we would like to embrace and bring into the company. If
Yeah.
you're hearing those things and you're getting those wrong answers, I think you're starting to see that you need to do some work and get in there and rebuild your sales organization.
I think those are great, straightforward. Those are pretty easy to self-diagnose and realize I got to make some changes. Especially that if you took the X amount of time off. I've been at, because I think you just said 90, but like even 30 days, it probably would start to falter and fall apart,
90 is a
right?
long one.
Yeah, yeah. As my own entrepreneur, sometimes I think about a week freaks me out. So I'm not sure what to do, but I'm earlier than that. But
But I've had clients where at the beautiful companies,
yeah,
huge machinery, great facilities, uh, 30, 40, 50, 70 employees. And I meet with the owner and they'll tell me, well, last week of the month, I need to call up a bunch of companies, a bunch of customers, and get some new business so that I can cover our budget shortfall and make
yeah.
payroll. And I'm like, wow, that's got to be incredibly frustrating and scary. If you're
Yeah.
sitting there looking like I'm personally responsible after 20 years of maintaining that revenue flow to cover payroll, then I have a serious problem in my company.
Mhm. What are some of the things that, if somebody's sitting here and they're going, oh, God, that is me. And like, obviously they can call you. That would be like a great first step. But if somebody's like, let me kick the tires, and especially as like, somebody who's a founder, they're probably going to want to try to get their hands on some stuff. They're a founder after all. What would you say is like, what are some good initial steps, some good initial things that they can start doing to start getting themselves out of these situations?
I think again, we both agree that it starts with being able to sell outbound.
Yeah.
Having this. So the first thing is who do you sell to? And a lot of companies really struggle, and leaders need to recognize that an ICP is far more than revenue, geography, industry, and number of employees. And that's really the ICP for a lot of smaller businesses. But ICP is really about why should somebody do business with you, and
Hmm.
understanding, the buying triggers, the business problems that you solve. Why are you better than the competition?
Yeah.
How does your price point fit who the buying company fit within their business model, and why is that the case? So I think founders, business owners need to see what kind of clarity do we have for that?
Yeah.
How as an organization, and if not, address that first. I believe in strategy, structure, process, tools, and people.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, um, so many times people are what's identified as the problem.
Yeah.
And we've hired 5 people. We've fired 4 of them after 6 months. Nobody's a fit. Nobody understands. They didn't bring a Rolodex. They didn't, understand what
Yeah.
we do. And then I recognize that you don't have a clear sales strategy. You don't have sales processes that fit that sales strategy. You don't have a tech stack. In today's world, you better have a pretty solid tech stack to
Yeah.
enable the people to execute that sales strategy and the processes that you want. And then the people properly incentivized to be able to execute what you're looking for them to deliver. So, I think as an owner, to recognize that it's systemic, right? It's a series of things that gets to success, and it's going to take some time. It's not a 6 month, suddenly we're going to be able to have a great pipeline and we're going to be successful and start to see new customers and revenue. It's a process, but I think owners need to recognize that it starts with who are we and why are we good and why should somebody want to talk to us?
Uh, it sounds like if you don't start with a strong ICP definition, you're never going to quite get to the top of the mountain from it. And a common problem, if not the complete lack of an ICP, is not the fully developed ICP. So if I'm trying to build that out further, I mean, would you say like there's a certain level of depth or full explanation that you can actually get to and, just be like, okay, I'm satisfied? Or, I mean, is this continuous process of always being refining and adding and continuing to look at? And how do I make sure that I've built my foundation of understanding my ICP fully before, going downstream and messing around with too much stuff?
Yeah, so I think you can do it the manual way, so to speak, which would be to really look at your top customer base
Hmm.
and revisit the sales process. And if you have any documentation, if you've got emails, anything that would allow you to understand the customer condition, what those conversations sounded like, what the pain that they were experiencing, how did you convey what you could do to solve that pain? If you can, go back and regurgitate that information and then map that out over a series of several customers, then you can start to really pick nuggets of that, and then be able to validate what your ICP is. I think that's really helpful. In today's world, you've got AI, right?
Yeah.
So AI accelerates this process, and if you've got that thinking that you're going through, and I've got, a client that we're implementing this today. So we have clarity to our ICP, what we believe is our ICP.
Hmm.
We're now taking our top 100 customers and we're then bouncing that up against an ICP scoring model that we built out
Nice. Yeah.
to be able to validate that those customers match with some pretty good, degree of regularity to what we believe to be our ICP. Once we've done that, then we have a really good hit. Then we can feel really comfortable that when we go out and do the prospecting, we go out and find not look-alike companies, but problem-alike companies. You
Hmm.
know, companies that are experiencing the same problems that our existing clients experienced before we started working with them, then we can go out and find a prospecting list pool that we can then reach out to with a degree of confidence that they're the right fit, and we can start qualifying them to then validate that and ensure that we'll be able to help them.
Yeah, I feel like the academic, like if you Googled it, definition of ICP is the firmographic stuff. Where are they located? How big are they? What's their revenue band? All this kind of stuff. And I think people stop there. And it sounds like the big hump that you have to get over and you'll find yourself in a much better place is the pain. The pain of the ICP, the problem that you're solving, understanding that, and that being the where people fall short most commonly is getting into that land. Um, I mean, how much value would you put on the academic part? Is that something to even hold on to? Is it enough for like maybe some rough guidance, or is it, hey, live in this pain similarity in the pain ICP instead?
Well, I think that framework is needed. I mean, obviously, if your company is more geared to working with a smaller company, then you want to have an ICP that we'd like to work with companies between 5 and 10 million.
Yeah.
or something, something like that, to where you're fit geographically. Our product really fits the educational system. So that's an industry target. All of that is true.
Yeah.
Um, but then you take it to the next level. So once you get past the framework, then you take it to what are the problems we're solving, and what are the buying signals, the triggers, what are the events? We talked about, you and I, about there's certain things that can happen to a company,
Mhm.
and government regulation hits them, or there's they get something happens in the stock market or the housing market, and that triggers an event that then your customer can then satisfy, right? So there's information out there that you can find. So
Mhm.
if you can find those triggering events, or systems, or using systems to do that, that's really valuable to help facilitate and accelerate that. Um, so I don't, using AI with a strong ICP helps you evaluate and identify the companies faster, identify people that are in those leadership positions at those companies faster, uh, and then being able to communicate messaging that's personalized, that will convey how you can solve and fix those problems because you have experience doing that, successful experience in a client base that will tell you that. You know, um, all that can be automated, and all that follow-up can happen faster, scheduled, so that you're less people dependent and more system dependent. But the framework of it is coming out of your head. It's coming out of, a strong ICP where you understand why we're good, and who we're good for.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it earlier, either while we were recording or before, and hopefully not before because it might be hard to reference, but timing being so important and it being like right now being the important part. And there's nothing better than hopping on a call with a prospect and they're like, hey, this is great timing. And it's like being like, this is going to be a great, discovery process that we're probably going to close them at a higher rate than if they didn't mention something like that. Now, is that something everyone's going to say if it really is the right timing? Maybe not, but it's such a good indicator. If
Yeah,
I'm
I
looking,
think that
oh, sorry.
we
Yeah,
we have to remember the basics of selling,
yeah,
which is helping somebody do something they can't do for themselves at a time that they need it.
right.
That's sales. That's the most elementary definition of selling, is exactly that. And I think people, make it all complex,
Yeah,
overly complex, when it's really about that. It's about, people made shoes in, hundreds of years ago because the cobblers made shoes because somebody else didn't know how to make a shoe or didn't want to make a shoe. They
yeah,
wanted to work in the field, so they need. So it really gets back to those basics, right? And I think that everything is an enabler on those basics.
yeah. No, love the simplicity in that because that's what it boils down to. There's a lot of ways that you can be more skillful and artful around it, and helps illuminate all of it. But at the same time, it always comes down to that fact. Um, for somebody who's looking at their ICP and they're like, I'm bought in on this. I want to reach out to the right person at the right time. And then they're kind of like, okay, but how do I start to figure this out for myself? Do you have any recommendations on like a brainstorming activity or a way to gather data or something that they can do to start identifying those ways to reach out at the right time?
So I definitely think that leadership should take the lead within the company, but then bring sales in on what kind of conversations they're having, so that those two, that can match.
Hmm.
Um, the 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 salespeople need to create the processes to be present, and to be able to systematically, the adage that it takes 8 times of communicating with somebody before you can really connect with them, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that most people stop after the second attempt. So, you know, and I don't blame them, when you have no idea whether that's even the right prospect, right?
Yeah.
But the more definition you have and clarity towards the right prospects, the more confidence your sales team has towards making that sixth, seventh, and eighth attempt and putting the effort to that as well. So once you have that matching of activity to message and strategy, then it all really starts to come together, and the salespeople feel better about what they're doing, and they remain motivated. Prospecting is difficult to maintain your motivation, and the more confidence you have in who the person you're trying to reach out to is really the right fit, you're far more motivated
Yeah.
to make that next call, make that on-site visit, get on that airplane, whatever that is to make that, continue to try and make that connection. The more confident you have that it will lead to a positive outcome, then you're more willing to do the work.
Yeah, I mean, you're like, am I really gonna make this, 10th, 12th phone call when I actually don't, in my heart of hearts, believe that this is the right person to be trying to reach out to, versus I'm on the other side of like a really great deal and I just gotta call like one or two more times, and like that right there is intrinsic, and you can't really make force somebody into compliance. They're gonna start getting like upset with it. So for that, instilling that confidence and all of that, what are ways that sales leaders can clearly demonstrate and communicate that things are on the right path, especially with, sales cycles typically taking so long that it can have the, hey guys, all right, we've made these adjustments, we've figured out the timing, we've figured all these things. It's not going to be perfect out of the gate, but in 3 to 6 months, you guys are going to start reaping the benefits of putting this effort in. And then how can a sales leader then be like making sure to demonstrate and communicate uh, to maintain that, or demonstrate and communicate the information that creates that confidence for those salespeople doing the prospecting?
Great question. So I solved that problem through the incentive plan and the targets that we create. The biggest weakness in incentive plans that I consistently see is they're not tied to strategy.
Hmm.
They're just out there all by themselves, and they're usually only focused on results.
Right.
So when your incentive plan is focused on strategy and process, then you start rewarding people for executing what you want them to execute. So you can reward people for not only the number of calls they make, but the number of meetings to companies that are a fit to the ICP,
Hmm.
um, the number of demos or the number of proposals that meet what you're looking for. If you want to highlight a specific product, create the incentive plan, I guess across all revenue, obviously, but extra incentive for specific products or geography or industry that you're trying to target. So when you measure those things, then and celebrate the results of those things, even if you haven't gotten to the top of the mountain, you're celebrating the walk up the mountain.
Yeah.
And that is, if you don't do that, then you're not going to get to the top. You're going to stop, at a midpoint. So you want to create then incentive plans that match what you're trying to deliver. And when you do that, then people remain motivated. Leadership says, yeah, this is working. We're getting, yeah, we haven't added 15 new clients, but we've had 35 meetings and they're selling to the people that we want them to sell to, and they're having the right conversations. And we're measuring that and rewarding that. So when you do those things, you're gonna get to where you want to get to.
Yeah. And as much as we want everyone to be perfect and to like have perfect strategy sessions and leadership and get everything right the first time, realistically, and people should give themselves grace that you're not going to get everything 100%. So as you're walking up that mountain, and you're making these adjustments, how are you keeping the sales team on board with the adjustments?
It's got to do the weekly meetings.
Hmm.
The weekly meetings have to be about evaluating your quarterly goals, looking at things that you were expected to do the previous week and did you get them done, talking about issues that are happening within the sales team across everybody that need to get resolved,
Yeah.
and looking at the performance. So having those meetings and then doing the one-on-ones. One more thing I should have mentioned is role playing is extremely important
Mhm.
within the weekly sales meeting. I can tell you that I have a client that we started role playing every week 3 years ago. And over that time, we've role played product knowledge, we've role played applications we're trying to fix, we've role played objection handling, pricing, um, discovery meetings, all the elements that you're looking for throughout the sales process. We've role played all of it. And the sales team is unbelievably skilled, more skilled than they were before.
Yeah.
So that's got to be a key part of your weekly sales meeting. So when you do those things and you measure the results through the right KPIs that are part of the walk, part of that, like you talked, part of the journey up
Yeah.
the mountain, not just the KPIs that measure being at the top of the mountain, but the KPIs that measure the journey up the mountain, then you really are keeping people, focused. Leadership remains confident. Other people in the company remain confident, which is really important.
Hmm.
Having finance and operations believe that the sales team is doing the work that you want them to do to get to the top of the mountain, and then maintaining the motivation because people feel good they are getting there, and then ultimately you got to get there, right? You got to get to the mountain, or you have to have a different conversation
Yeah.
with an individual. But you got to recognize that it's a journey, and by identifying it, all the different milestones you're trying to achieve, and then rewarding people through that process will keep people motivated. And if they're doing that work and you feel good about them and how they're growing, continuous improvement, then you're going to feel good that they're going to get there.
Nice. All right, Michael, we're getting to the end of our time, but before I let you go, I like to ask everybody if they're listening in, if somebody's listening into this conversation and they can take away one thing that they just have to make sure that they keep in mind, and maybe they forget everything else, they should remember everything else, but if there's just one thing that they can take with them, what would it be?
Well, I'll go back to, the focus of my business is to help founders get through the founders-led sales ceiling,
Hmm.
and recognizing, doing the self-reflection of the elements of it. I'm too engaged in sales. My sales team doesn't operate independently. I've got high turnover in my sales team because they don't follow, there isn't a strategy that they're following. They're having to do it themselves and they become frustrated and leave. You're not hitting your revenue goals. You don't have a forecast because there's no pipeline that's really validated and there's no sales processes that take a deal from beginning to end. So if you're doing the self-reflection and seeing those things in your business, then I'm really happy to talk to you.
Cool. Awesome. Michael, I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you very much.